House Bill 2664. It's very confusing because there's 2644 and 2664. Representative Frederick. And Representative Frederick, your guidance would be helpful. We've had more testimony than I expected today on a variety of things, and a lot of people in a short amount of time. So we can carry this over, but your guidance and who to bring up in the time we have left would be most
okay, that's fine. There are a couple of people. I'm looking around to recognize them at this point. I haven't talked with them yet, so I know some folks came in specially for today, from coming in from Portland. So, and someone from Eugene, I believe, as well. So let me see what I can do here. I'll take the advice of several people behind me as soon as I finish here. That's all right. Chair Gelser, members of the committee, I'm Lou Frederick, representative from House District 43, North and Northeast Portland. I come to you today to start the discussion of House Bill 2664 on standardized testing in our schools. The first thing I have to say is that the emphasis on standardized testing has profoundly affected the educational experience in Oregon public schools. Several teachers, parents, and students will paint that picture for you. It's not just the number of times the tests are administered, although that's one issue. The ever higher stakes attached to the results of these tests necessarily makes it that makes that which is tested the highest priority when it comes to curriculum. The second thing is that these tests are expensive. That's not just a statement of fact, it's also a big part of why this change has taken place. The extent to which our schools have been overrun with the emphasis on testing is more a result of successful sales pitches than evidence of benefit. Here in this building, we're pretty fixated on one budget, the one where we decide where to spend our limited dollars. In a public school classroom, there are several resources that are also on a tight budget. Time, the teacher's attention, the student's attention, everybody's enthusiasm, to name some. When we're thinking about costs versus benefits, those budgets have to be taken into account. In education policy, we talk a lot about outcomes. I don't disagree with that intention, but a test score is not an outcome. What outcomes are we really talking about? What, for example, will members of the current generation of school children be doing when they reach their 20s and 30s? Will they be part of an economy of innovation or at the mercy of an economy driven by innovators elsewhere in the world? And I'm not asking about what they will do to earn their living, although that's important. I'm talking about how they will participate as citizens. How will they raise their own children? How will they process the information bombarding them in order to make decisions in our democracy? Will they be literate enough in the skepticism and urge to verify that characterizes science to avoid manipulation by junk science and snake oil salesmen? Will they be literate enough in math to avoid manipulation by bogus statistics? Will they be literate enough in history to appreciate lessons our society has already learned? Or will they be doomed to repeat them? Will they be able to follow a logical argument, and will they be able to make one? Will they have the capacity to appreciate the many wonderful things created by human minds, hearts, and hands? Will the wisdom of the ages inform their lives? These are some of the questions that trouble me, because that's how you plan for outcomes. Whenever a child score on a reading, whatever a child score on a reading test, if that child doesn't appreciate reading as a gateway to knowledge and experience, then we, and I emphasize we, not the child, fail. If it is found that these tests impair rather than promote the outcomes we really need to see, then, well, let's just say that they don't represent money well spent. Now, I can't tell you the number of times I've listened to presentations regarding educational programs and measurements with a glance towards me. The argument begins that this is for those poor children and children of color, or so-called at-risk children, that this is about closing the achievement gap. To that I say, frankly, give me a break. Again, I don't give a rip about a test score gap. I care about a gap in richness and breadth of experience. I care about a gap in vision of what the future holds. I care about a gap in enthusiasm for academic subjects that are gateways to real success. I'm tired of hearing these kids discussed as if they're damaged goods. Yes, it's true that some families have more capacity. Excuse me. It's true that some families have more capacity to provide enriched opportunities for their children. But the answer to that disparity is not to subject those without such opportunities to a stripped-down program in school. And it's certainly, It's certainly not to make school more tedious. Again, the outcome that matters is a couple of decades away, when the elementary students of today are the young professionals, inventors, entrepreneurs, artists, and tradespeople, and the young parents of tomorrow. I don't think that the test vendors of today have the capacity to define that outcome. Yet that is exactly the risk we have taken. By devaluating, thank you, by devaluating educational professionals and delegating curriculum to test developers. Now, the stories told today will be characterized as anecdotal, but that's the point of this bill. We have gone far down the trail of committing resources of time and money to this testing regimen, and as it turns out, far down the trail of allowing it to drive what our students study and how they study it. It is past time to get some hard evidence as to whether we're on the right trail, because if we're not, every school year is another year going in the wrong direction. This bill simply recognizes that educational policy should be evaluated as to real outcomes. It calls for an evaluation of the effects of standardized testing as currently mandated, a cost-benefit analysis, if you will. I believe it is vital that this take place, so that when we come back into session in 2 years, we'll have solid evidence as to on which to base our decisions. Thank you. I think there are several others here to testify who can do a better job than I can of giving you a feel of how the learning environment, the school day, and the school year have changed as a result of the focus on high-stakes tests. Thank you.
Representative Frederick?
Yes.
Help me out here. We have about 5 minutes before we have to clear the room, and a lot of people who I know have traveled.
There are some students.
Yeah, so let's bring the students.
Definitely have come
let's
up.
bring the students first, and then just kind of collectively, if we were going to roll this over for a half hour, what works better, Wednesday or Friday?
Well, I know some of the teachers, as I've said, have taken they've taken a day off for themselves on their own time to come down here. I'm thinking, I know that we have the students and the other teachers.
Let's bring the students first, and then people can collectively think about Wednesday, Friday, or if we need to look forward.
Thank you.
To get everybody. And so if you're a student and you're planning to talk, come on forward. And if you're a teacher who took the day off, also come on forward. And I will stay until someone has me leave the room to get through the people who are students and who are teachers that have gotten off work. Some members may need to leave to get to their next committee. All right, welcome.
Sure. So my name is Alexia Garcia, and I'm a senior at Lincoln High School. I also serve on the PPS and Portland student unions, and I'm the elected student representative to our PPS school board. So with that, I've learned a lot about the education system and done a lot of research specifically on standardized testing. And the student unions have taken a pretty strong stance against standardized testing. And with that said, we're very supportive of this bill because we do see it as an opportunity to kind of question the role that standardized testing should be playing in our education system. And so we're supportive of this bill as we see standardized tests as being something incredibly expensive. They limit the funding that is actually going into our education system. So you see millions of dollars spent on our current testing system. With the new Common Core state standards, we see that numbers looking like it's going to double, if not triple. And beyond that, you have the achievement compacts and all this data analysis that goes into testing and ends up costing millions of dollars, whereas we'd like to see that money being invested directly into our classrooms. I mean, you heard from the other speakers about how big our class sizes are and how much students would benefit from smaller class sizes. We'd like to see the programs going directly to support students instead of into this testing system that then goes to rank students, rank our schools, evaluate our teachers, and not really end up supporting actual learning. And beyond that, we see it as a huge equity issue. We see these tests as the scores having a really high correlation between race and class, and study after study shows that there's racial biases built into these tests, and we just wonder why we're supporting this system when we could be supporting actual learning and student-teacher relationships and, I guess, a more holistic approach to education. So.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Janice Gillies. I teach third grade at Bilquist Elementary in North Clackamas. As a teacher, I spend hours just helping my children understand the login process and the process of taking a standardized test. This will be the first time my children will but certainly not the last time for them to experience standardized testing process. This will determine how they view themselves through their educational careers. You see, as a child begins to believe if they fail the test, for any reason, they aren't good enough. Because the situation's out of the control of the teacher or the student, failing the test impacts them. I've seen students cry when they fail the test and it becomes a torture that they know they will endure for years. I often hear statements like, "I knew I was dumb in math." If I didn't have to teach to the test, I would have more time to be sure my students understood concepts. I would not just keep pushing my students to understand the concepts that are on the test. With many children becoming transient in our schools, we need additional time to help them build background knowledge. Test preparation takes valuable time away from actual instruction and interpersonal communication with my students. I am saddened when I hear that the United States is losing status in the world market competition, because I wonder if we spent more time teaching the love of learning than test taking, we'd be ahead. This year I am gifted with only 27 students. Last year I started the year with 38. Of these students, 13 were English language learners. Several more were on individualized education plans. One student had just left a self-contained classroom to join the general population. Preparing for the test was a daunting experience. It's nearly impossible to move around an overly crowded classroom. Checking that children with limited English understand what I'm saying. Keeping students focused on the test is sometimes a challenge. I too support having the system reviewed. We don't have the time to have conversations with each child after testing. Our students need more than one way to express and explain their knowledge of what they have learned and what I've been able to teach.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And rather than asking for questions, I would bring up the next couple of folks that have taken the day off. Welcome.
My name is Michelle Arco. I teach science and occasionally math at Happy Valley Middle School in the North Clackamas School District. Standardized testing has assumed a prominent role in our recent efforts to improve the quality of education. I myself have written line items for the science test of Oaks, so I'm not completely opposed to science testing, but I am concerned because I feel like that the national, state, and district tests have resulted in a hugely expanded set of requirements for public schools, and the cost of this is at the expense of our students and our teachers and our administrator times. And even though there are some significant benefits to testing, I feel like it also has a lot of negative impacts which we can't ignore. There's a lot of research that shows that we use the test in inappropriate ways to categorize students, and that can have huge impacts on their lives. And we heard the last person what they were talking about. My own personal experience with this is that students oftentimes will fall into one of two categories. They will either take the test and pass it and feel that that gives them some sort of value, and that value to them leads them to this, am I going to be tested on this syndrome, where they start to value the things only that are going to be found on the test. And the unfortunate thing about this is that the higher level a skill is, the less likely we are to test it. Mm-hmm. And so we spend our time focusing on these low-level skills that are knowledge-based skills as opposed to higher-level thinking skills. And that's for the students who pass. And then the other side of it is the students who don't pass, and the students who are continually told that they don't measure up. And that to me is really sad. I've seen students click C, 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 C on a state test. And afterwards, when I've talked to them, I said, you didn't even pick up a calculator to do the math test. They said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Why would I do that? I'm not going to get a better score. And when forced to retake, the reality was they didn't get a better score. They got the exact same score. And how demotivating that is for students to even bother to try when they've had these experiences all along from kindergarten up. And now, with 40 kids in my classroom, that makes it much harder for me to prepare kids. And the economy for sure plays an impact on this, with our class sizes. But I would so strongly urge you to think about what the girl before me said when she said that, how do we want to invest our money? How do we want to do that? We need to take a serious look at how standardized testing impacts our time to teach, our curriculum, and our ability to focus on meaningful instruction, and where our resources are being dedicated and allocated.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, I don't know.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Lisa Orcutt-Kane. I've taught third grade in Portland Public Schools now for about 7 years, but I've taught everything from pre-K to college. And I felt compelled to come to talk when we talk about standardized testing because I've been here 26 years in teaching, and I've seen the damage that it's done. And to give you a picture of my daily routine in terms of assessment, I figure out what kids need to know. I teach it. We monitor. I go around, see who's doing okay. I make adjustments to my teaching, and they demonstrate their teaching. And what it becomes is a circular process, and I would call it a relationship between student, teacher, and curriculum. The best compliment a parent has ever given me was that what we do in my classroom is teach children to strive. My goal is always to teach children to open their minds and go further. Now I want to tell you what happens when we go in and take a standardized test. We sit down at a computer and we log on, if we can, and that's not always something that can happen. We try to have enough computers for the students that we must do that for, but that's not always going to happen. And then we sit there in silence for over an hour with 8-year-olds, and then they get a score. And that score tells them absolutely nothing, and it tells me one point of data. I cannot tell what my students know. I cannot tell what to teach them next. It is absolutely not useful for me in the next day. It doesn't help me. Plus, I get it in, April or May, so that's a whole other issue. My students are very aware. They're 8 years old, and they are very aware that this piece of data is the one that matters. How is it that they know? It's a mystery number. I mean, I've seen kids cheer for 213, and I've seen kids cheer for 248. They have no idea what it means, but they know it's important.
And I have to prompt you that we're going to get kicked out in a second.
Okay. These tests have driven so much of what we do in education, and I want to leave you with a little boy named Calvin. This sums it up. We sign paperwork before we go into that room stating that we won't teach, that we will not respond to questions. This is something that all of us teachers do before we go into that room. My brightest little boy last year, Calvin, said, "Can I go back and find out what I did wrong?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Do you know what I did wrong?" "No." "Do you know which ones I missed?" "No." "Can I find out how I can do better?" "No." And that's what these tests make us do. That's the only piece of data I'm required to give the state of Oregon, and that's the kind of teaching that's happening around the state. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to apologize to all of the folks that are here. I don't think that I had anticipated the number of people on any of the bills that we had today. And maybe rather than trying to rush it into Wednesday or Friday of this week, which I imagine would be a hardship for people who have traveled, let me follow up with Representative Frederick, and let's find a day that works well for most of you, maybe not in this week, so we're not impacting your work and your studies. Does that seem reasonable, Representative Frederick? But we will come back and get the rest of you. It's an important issue, and I thank you for bringing it. Oh, Representative Fagan?
I just wanted to say, for those of you maybe who prepared testimony and could not speak today and maybe can't come back, most of the members of the committee have something to go to right now. I do not. So I'm up on the 4th floor in 492. If you have a moment and you'd like to come share what you had prepared with me, I'll be there. I don't have a meeting until 3:30, so I'd be happy to listen to you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to, haven't closed the hearing yet, closing the hearing on House Bill 2664. And the House Committee on Education is adjourned.